And we're back
Good
for
morning.
the final review lesson. Hello, everybody.
Hi.
Lesson 60. Okay.
Lesson 60.
Yeah, it's a good one. Okay.
More
Start. When we
this,
start?
this is the last of the review lessons, right?
Did I say last lesson? I'm sorry, I meant last review lesson. Yeah, for a while. Okay. The first idea, truth. God is the love in which I forgive. So we can't have forgiveness without love. God does not forgive because he has never condemned. The blameless cannot blame, and those who have accepted their innocence see nothing to forgive. Yet forgiveness is the means by which I will recognize my innocence. It is the reflection of God's love on earth. It will bring me near enough to heaven that the love of God can reach down to me and raise me to my home. Oh, yeah, feeling that one.
Me too. Beautiful. What a deep peace in there, in resting in that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So can we look at this a little bit more?
Yeah.
God is the love in which I forgive, and can we discuss something here?
Yes.
Okay, when I first began the course, I did a lot of forgiveness.
Who was doing it?
Yeah, Rob. Okay. It was the ego doing the forgiveness, right? So just a reminder that it's not us who does the forgiveness, right? It's actually not even our forgiveness. It's just our willingness to join Holy Spirit and to give him our mistakes.
Yes.
To give him our mistaken perceptions, right? And
Yeah.
I mean, that's what forgiveness is. And we don't actually, I remember back then when this is 30 odd years ago, I really tried to forgive my mother, and the anger just kept resurfacing, even 2-3 years later or whatever it was. And it was the ego trying to do the forgiveness. And I'd made her an enemy, and then I believed it was real.
Mm-hmm.
And then I tried to forgive her. Well, the simple fact that I had made it real means that it couldn't be forgiven.
Right.
Right. So it took a long, long time for me to learn that that I needed to be willing to forgive myself for having made it real in the first place.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. And forgiveness to destroy, or is it false forgiveness? What is it? Anyway, corrupted innocence. It's this belief that I'm forgiving you of something that you really did, but because I'm so benevolent and I'm a little holier than you, I'm going to extend forgiveness, right? So it has nothing to do with that. It's recognizing I'm seeing and giving life to an illusion, and I don't want this anymore. And so I am allowing God's view, creation with a capital C, to replace what I'm seeing, because I know this isn't true and I don't want this anymore. So it's really wanting to join with God, who is love. We're bringing heaven to earth, in through this forgiving and atoning for the illusion. It is the reflection of God's love on earth. And it's the highest thing we can do in the dream, right? The mythical me simply consents to allowing this correction. I don't want this anymore. and we're asking for the correction to be made.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's helpful. So we're still on lesson 60, the review, and the second idea here or lesson is God is a strength in which I trust. It is not my own strength through which I forgive. It is through the strength of God in me, which I am remembering as I forgive. As I begin to see, I recognize his reflection on earth. I forgive all things because I feel the stirring of his strength in me. And I begin to remember the love I chose to forget, but which has not forgotten me.
So we don't even have to rely on our own strength, right? There goes the I know mind, or the trying, or the thinking that you have to know and figure it all out.
Qualifying for his love and his forgiveness, right? Thinking we need to atone for, we, the ego, for what we made, right? In other words, that we need to figure it all out, problem solve it. Yeah.
Yeah. How comforting is that? You know?
God is a strength in which I trust. That's that faith in him. He only needs our willingness, right, to heal. And it's his faith that heals us. It's his strength. It's his innocence. Yeah.
The willingness to close the perceived gap between us and God so that we draw on his strength, his mind, his love, his certainty becomes ours when we stop defending ourselves as somebody apart from him.
Very clear. Very, very clear. Very succinct. Thank you.
Thank you. The third review lesson is there is nothing to fear. There is nothing to fear. How safe the world will look to me when I can see it. It will not look anything like what I imagine I see now. Everyone and everything I see will lean toward me to bless me. I will recognize in everyone my dearest friend. What could there be to fear in a world which I have forgiven and which has forgiven me? And I can just say from some personal glimpses of the real world that it's absolutely the truth that everybody that you encounter is for you and a friend, and you can feel love, whether you in the dream you know that person or not. And the world and nature has a way of winking and smiling and shining back upon you. And fear cannot enter because you're so filled with a sense of completion and that you are literally love and one with God. So not in a world that you can be threatened. So there truly is nothing to fear. And you'll know that when we're willing to lay down our defenses. What a beautiful world that arises in its place.
Thank you. And, personal experience like you, the old me, Nouk, really was living in a state of anticipation of threat. Okay. Anticipation of loss, which is fear. And so that draws us into, well, for me, and I'm sure for nearly everyone else, into the idea that we need to plan for our future against anticipated loss, right? Or threat. So it's not realizing through the ego that we're planning for our own demise every time we do that, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And their defenses against God's love, right there. So what we expect, then unfortunately we do end up manifesting. So if we expect fear, if we anticipate fear, that is exactly what we're going to bring in.
Right. Yeah, and that's the result of when we love independently from God with an ego's love, when we draw on the mythical me's strength, when we try to see apart from God and will apart from God, all of that results in a sense of guilt because, again, part of our mind, we know that we are one in God, but we're doing something that, we cannot actually pull off. It brings guilt, a sense that we're defying God, our loving creator. So everything, the independent mythical me, everything that it's doing when it's not being done with Holy Spirit, the result is guilt, and the guilty are fearful of punishment. And the human condition is you wake up in the morning and you can feel it. It settles in and it's like the fight or flight, always stressful, always ready to pounce. What can I do to protect myself today? When's the other shoe going to drop? Yeah, that's
a horrible place to be and to live out from compared to where we are at now.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes. I mean, let's be honest, daily, there's very, very little in our experience of anticipated threat these days. Would you agree with me on that?
Way better. Much, much better.
Isn't it?
Yes.
It's like, wow, no matter what's going on in the world, while we're recording this, there seems to be a global pandemic in the ego world. There seems to be a massive political unrest in the USA, and obviously, the ripple effect of that throughout the world is pretty big as well. And yet, there's no part of me, and I say this in all honesty, there's no part of me that's worried about that.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. God is the strength in which I trust. God is the light in which I see. Right? So there's less and less independent Nouk that's trying to plan her life or defend against uncertainties to come, which is really attracting them. So as that's fallen away, there's this deep, deep, beautiful sense of peace and loving encouragement and support.
Yes. We're being heard. Yeah. Thank you.
Because we're willing, we're choosing not to be an independent, separate self.
Right.
Yeah. So the guilt is, most of the guilt has fallen away.
Beautifully stated. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. So are we up to number 4?
Yes.
Is it my turn to read or yours?
It's yours.
Number 4 is God's voice speaks to me all through, I was going to say throughout the day. God's voice speaks to me all through the day. There is not a moment in which God's voice ceases to call on my forgiveness to save me. There is not a moment in which his voice fails to direct my thoughts, guide my actions, and lead my feet. I am walking steadily on toward truth. There is nowhere else I can go because God's voice is the only voice and the only guide that has been given to his Son. Beautiful. So God's voice speaks to me all through the day. Yeah.
Yes.
And regardless if we are listening to the ego, right? If we choose to listen to the ego, his voice is always there, constantly, uninterrupted. The thing is that if we're not aware of his voice, then it's because we're choosing to listen to a non-existent ego in our thoughts, right?
Yes. Again, it's the choice.
It's a choice. Okay. When he says here, God's voice speaks to me all through the day, I just want to make I want to clarify something here. It could also come as a feeling. It could come as what we classify as intuition, divine intuition, as a gut knowing. It can come through the voice of someone else.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Just stretch our mind, be wide open. Don't have a fixed idea that has to be a voice and I have to hear it through my ears.
Right.
It doesn't always happen that way. It's kind of a knowing. It could also be just a thought that is presented to us, and it's God's thought, and we know it clearly because of the contrast between God's thought in our mind and the ego's thoughts of fear and control in our mind and condemnation, right? Did you want to add to that, sis?
Well, yeah, like a shower or a fountain, it's always pouring forth, and it will use any means that we're willing to receive. So we might be frightened by a direct voice, but we're not frightened by drawing a card, or we're not frightened, a friend calls and delivers a message and it's like, that's exactly what I needed to hear.
Or a
Oh,
song that comes through and we just drop to our knees and burst into tears of gratitude because we recognize God's voice in the song.
right.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful because you realize this is God communicating. God's communicating to me. This wasn't random. This wasn't a coincidence. My friend didn't just happen to know where I was at that moment. It was like, wow, okay, God is just using any means that I'm open and receptive to. And it's interesting to note that those that were, the prophets back in the day, even before Jesus, it says that they spoke to God as clearly as you and I speak to each other. So that's also a possibility when we stop insisting that it's not. So that's kind of exciting. Children say they talk to God all the time. I remember the same thing. So yes, before doubt ever settled in. Okay. Last one. I am sustained by the love of God. I am sustained by the love of God. As I listen to God's voice, I am sustained by his love. As I open my eyes, his love lights up the world for me to see. As I forgive, his love reminds me that his son is sinless. And as I look upon the world with the vision he has given me, I remember that I am his son. As I listen, open, forgive, look, I remember. As we do these things with God. Yeah. Oh.
When I was doing the lessons a few years ago, doing the lesson, I'm sustained by the love of God, I heard Jesus' voice amend that lesson, that statement in my mind very loudly. And it kind of changed everything for me from that point on. And where he changed it from, I am sustained by the love of God, to I am sustained exclusively by the love of God.
Yeah. Or you could say only. Yeah. Right.
So, that just like blew my mind because all of a sudden that invited in for me to take a good old look without any self-judgment, no guilt, at what it was that I believed I was sustained by other than the love of God. And I had a good old laundry list, a couple of pages when I wrote it all down. And I was like, well, what am I supposed to do with this? And his voice came through again, said, give them to me.
Yeah.
And that was it. It was huge. It was like it was an awakening. Is that it? Don't I have to do anything else? No, give them to me. So that's a beautiful exercise to do,
Yeah.
which is to make that list of everything that we use as a substitute for the love of God that we believe sustains us, and give the purpose of them to Him. It doesn't mean we lose them. It just gives Him permission to come in and to divinely repurpose all of these false substitutes.
Mm-hmm.
The love of God.
Right.
Divinely repurposes them. Yeah.
So looking at maybe something like our means to pay our bills, abundance and supply, we're going to think that it's our job and that the paycheck that comes bi-weekly sustains us and our livelihood and our comfort and our enjoyment and our ability to pay the bills and eat, buy food. And while we're, gripping that and fearful of it and think that it's, ours, God says He's pouring forth more than we can ever even accept. But while we insist that what sustains us comes through this symbol, we're never available to what God truly has for us. So he's asking, let's give credit where credit is due. It's like God sustains us, not the paycheck, not the job, not the body, not looks, not our special relationships, not the things that we own and try to accumulate or collect. These things don't sustain us. The love of God, love knows us, created us, knows what we need, provides everything. Jesus says, take no thought for your life. It's really just a consecrated recognition that my whole life, I am because God is, and God knows what we have need of and has already answered. And then that frees us up. It doesn't mean the paycheck's going to go, but maybe God has something else even better. But we'll never open ourselves up to it while we're vice gripping something that we believe sustains us. It actually blocks us from our knowledge of our inheritance, the kingdom of heaven. It's a block.
Yeah, and that's right, sis. And that was the other thing you've just reminded me too, is that in that lesson, for me, is I was also asked by Jesus to see, or to recognize that that I, through the ego, I had no idea of what the real purpose was of all of these things.
Yeah.
All right? As soon as we go and label something, like what you're saying there, as soon as we label it and think we know what it's for, we've lost awareness of its true purpose.
That's right.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you.
We give it our own, the ego's own definitions, and then we've lost it. We don't know what anything is. We're back to meaninglessness.
Yeah.
Wow.
Thank you.
Good. That felt good.
Wow. The first of our 10 review lessons, no, 50 review lessons, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, amazing.
So we start next time with lesson 61. Great. Wow. Thanks, guys, for joining us in all these review lessons. I'm excited about getting into 61.
Me. We'll change our clothes by then.
Definitely. Definitely. We love you and we thank you. And we're hoping that the supplemental material blesses you and helps you dive even deeper into these holographic teachings that are in the workbook lessons. We welcome your feedback, and please don't hesitate again to check out the website, nouksanchez.com, courses and offerings to see. There's so much there and it's all free. So please ring it out, grab it, take it for what it's worth, and we'll see you next time online. Thanks, everybody.
Which reminds me, one more thing.
Okay.
I'm just kidding. Okay. In the description box down below, there's a whole list of all of these incredible resources on our website. you know, the forgiveness process is there, a whole lot of other things. So make sure that you avail yourself to that.
Yeah. Yeah, we're pumping it out. So you grab it, go with it, run with it. We live for this. Thanks, everybody.
See you
Bye.
tomorrow.
See ya.
Bye.